Well, welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us today for today's webinar. I'm Dan Thompson. I will be your host for today's event. Oh, and there is my face on Dr. Close's slide for the day. Before today's presentation, I'm just going to knock out a few logistics. We're first and foremost, today's presentation is being recorded. It will be distributed to attendees after the event. I do also have a few Zoom features I'd like to go through. Brandy, if you could, thank you. The few Zoom features I'd like to go through today, and we most certainly would love your participation. So first and foremost, the QA feature, which is on the left side of the bar there, is for any questions you may have for our presenter. I will see those and I will share them at the end of the presentation. Luckily, Brandy has also given me the go-ahead to interrupt her if it is topical, so thank you in advance for that, Brandy. We'll, if it is topical, we'll make sure we get your question in at that time. We do have a few poll questions today, and they will populate automatically on your screen. We'd greatly appreciate your participation. I promise I have those set to anonymous. And then also the chat feature on the bar there is for general inquiries. So we may be posting things throughout the presentation, and we'd love to, if you have any thoughts you'd like to share with the whole group, those will go in there. Finally, we always love getting social with our webinars, and today is no different. So we will be tweeting today using the hashtag and from the handle at the bottom of every screen. And if you would like to add to the conversation, we'd greatly appreciate that. Please use that hashtag, which is Learning with Leo. To follow along and participate, just search the hashtag in your search bar in Twitter and then click on the latest tab at the top, and it will show you all the latest tweets using that hashtag. We always believe here that we learn best as a community, and so again, we're happy to hear your thoughts. Okay, that's officially enough for me, so I'm more than happy to get to the main event for today, which is managing the Clerkship Lottery, enhance efficiency in a complex process, which is presented by Dr. Brandy Close. And so I'm just gonna intro Brandy before we go here, and with more than 2 decades of experience working in education, those 2 decades means that Brandy started when she was, what, 14 then? In education, technology, and curriculum, Brandy is passionate about using educational technology to improve educational strategies and processes. Brandy has worked in medical education for more than 7 years and has taught at both the secondary and university levels. Prior to her career in medical education, Brandy was a curriculum developer for NASA, where she designed and developed curriculum for several NASA education projects, which is very cool. While much of Brandy's expertise lies in curriculum management, her focus is always on finding solutions through research and technology. With that, you guys don't have to hear me talk anymore. It's my pleasure to turn things over to Dr. Close.
Thank you, Dan. I really appreciate that. And out of all the times that we've presented together in the past, I think that might have been the nicest introduction. So, and I didn't even have to pay you for it. So thank you for that. So thanks, guys. Thank you, everybody who's joining us. Welcome. And this is a topic that I think is so important in medical education, and it's a topic that's been around for a long time, and finding solutions to make it a more efficient process is time-tested, and it's still ongoing. So I'm happy to be able to talk to you guys today about that, and some of my insights and information today come from a little bit of kind of a mixture from my time in medical education, my time in the research and in the literature, and my time on the side of the ed tech as well. So that's where I'm coming from. So let's get started. Our objectives today. So our primary objectives are going to be, being able to recognize why a clerkship process and scheduling process is so complex. I think everybody who works in medical education that deals with the clerkship scheduling would agree that it's not an easy situation. So recognizing what makes it so complex is always the first step. Discussing best practice approaches to managing a clerkship lottery. So there's ways to approach clerkship scheduling, but being able to understand, what's going to be best towards managing that clerkship lottery is the challenge. That's the challenge that we all face. So we really want to have a rich discussion about that. And then in the end, really being able to take what you've recognized in the complexity and maybe some new best practice approaches, and then taking that information and then being able to utilize your resources and your technology around you to increase efficiency in this complex process. So that's where we're headed today with the presentation. So I would love to be able to kind of find out who I'm talking to today. I thought it would be really great to be creative with this, and I would love to take credit for asking such a fun and creative question, but I did sort of hijack this from the Google. So I have to give, the internet credit for this. So if you wouldn't mind going ahead and kind of just letting us know if your city where you're at right now was a breed of dog, which breed would you use to describe where you are? And Dan, are you going to help me figure out what the answers are coming in as?
Most certainly.
Okay,
we
great.
have several have voted already, just a few more, and then we'll close the poll in about 15 seconds.
Okay. I'm excited. This is one of the more exciting parts. I want to see what people are answering.
Okay, thank you everybody for your participation. So some folks across the board today, Brandy, we have a quarter of our crew would say their city is just like a Jack Russell, small, tough, opinionated. All right. And also a quarter of them it says are Labradoodle or some other curious hybrid. So I might ask some of those folks to post what that other hybrid is in the chat just for fun. And then across the board, we have some.
Oh, yeah, that would be fun.
Some folks that must be from a small town. It's a very rare breed that nobody knows about is what's popping up as well. So thank you for your votes today. Those are interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for that. That was really fun. It was fun for me. I hope it was fun for you too. All right, well, so let's get started for real this time. Okay, so why is the clerkship scheduling process so complex? There's so many pieces to the puzzle, and anytime you have lots of moving parts and lots of pieces to what we call the clerkship scheduling puzzle, it's going to be complex. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that no two clerkship programs are identical. Every program has its own process or structure, and you can see 4 examples here from 4 different schools about how they create their clerkship structure. And then the managing process of it, managing the scheduling, is either done on paper or through an Excel spreadsheet, or it's done through some sort of technology. But either way, there's no one size fits all solution out there for somebody to go to get the answers they need, like so many other things. So what makes it so complex specifically? So gathering the necessary data. So at the institution I worked at for about 5.5 years, I wasn't in charge of the clerkship process, but I was a key player in the managing of the scheduling. Had a lot of influence on it. And I'll explain more about what that means in just a little bit. But I do know that I learned very quickly that one of the more, challenging pieces to the puzzle, and you wouldn't really think about it, at least I didn't, was getting the information about what sites students will be able to rotate at, how many students can rotate at different times throughout the academic year, who's going to be the clinical faculty as the preceptors, and then also just the schedule itself of what are our clerkship schedule going to look like. Are we going to do 4 week, 8 week, 6 week? Are we going to do phases, whatever? And so all that is like sort of the first piece that makes it complex. And then the second piece is the process of getting the students to enroll. And a lot of schools do self-enrollment. A lot of schools have students engage in a system where they can preference their choices, or some schools also just assign the students, and the students don't have the ability to make those choices, and some schools use a variation of those three things. So because of those options, one of the other pieces that makes it complex is making it a fair process. And that's something that is difficult to do when you're talking about pleasing 200 plus students. So the next piece of the puzzle is available resources. Now, when I think of resources, and from my perspective, the way I'm talking about resources throughout this presentation is not just technology, and that's usually where our minds go first off is, what technology resources do we have, or monetary or whatever, but really about the people as well. The people that are going to be seeing these students at these sites, and then the people that are managing on the administrative side, managing the process as it's being scheduled and then beyond once the clerkships are in full swing. And then the last piece is the ability to be flexible and understand the variability that comes along with it, because we all know that as perfect as we can get our scheduling process, there was always going to be a time period where students are going to want to make some swaps and some changes, and then change requests happen, and you just have to be flexible and variable within your process to be able to accommodate those things. So those are the four key pieces that make it so complex. So before we go any further into talking about these things, how does your institution currently schedule clerkships? This is really important for me to find out here, so that this is really going to help me understand the best way to drive the rest of the conversation, is to really get a sense of my audience here of what challenges you're dealing with and what you're working with currently.
And the poll is currently open, and it will remain open for about 30 seconds more. Thank you for participating. About 15 more seconds. And Brandy, great job on the wait time.
Yeah. I'm really interested in seeing what our audience has to say here.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the poll is now closing. Thank you everyone for your participation. All right, so Brandy, here's what we're working with today. We have exactly 2/3 of the audience. Students participate in a lottery via a software platform. And then 13% said none of the above. And then we had small percentages, all around 7% amongst the other choices, as far as students self-enrolling in software via paper, and students in a lottery via a paper-based method. So thank you everyone for your participation.
Yeah. Awesome, yes, thank you very much. So I sort of anticipated the majority having some sort of technology solution that was assisting in this. But as you heard Dan say, there are still, in the audience, I'm assuming is a small representative of the larger medical education community. And so that there are still, folks out there dealing with paper-based lotteries, even your technology solution, self-enroll or participate in a lottery. There's ways that we can look at how that's being done now and try to make it more efficient. Okay, so the pain points. So these are pain points that I experienced personally at OSU, and also what I hear from folks on a regular basis about what they're experiencing working to try and schedule clerkships. And one of the biggest things is inheriting the current clerkship scheduling process. That's a mouthful. So that's true for any situation, not just clerkship scheduling. If you are someone who has inherited a process, it may not have been the most efficient process, but you inherited it and it was expected continue this way. And so that could be a pain point for someone. And we have lots of conversations around that with folks. The process takes too long. It's a very long, drawn out process for some. And for some others, it's quick. But for some, this is a pain point. And the number of people and resources available, it could be very small at some institutions. And so that makes it very difficult to manage the process efficiently if you're resource light, so to speak. And then student satisfaction, trying to make it fair. I mentioned this a little earlier. It's really difficult to do sometimes whenever you have 200 plus students with their own opinions about what is fair. And then, of course, you have sort of these external issues that could cause pain points. Trying to make sure that there's adequate housing for your sites, transportation, all the personal situations that sort of play into managing clerkship schedules. So the greatest challenge is efficiency. So taking all of these pain points and figuring out a way to sort of attack it from a perspective of, let's get more efficient with everything. Let's not make it so painful. Let's try to eliminate some of these pain points. So we're trying to go from something that could be very time intensive, maybe paper-based, maybe Excel spreadsheet based, to something way more efficient and clean, and something that somebody else other than yourself or a group of you does the heavy lifting. So how do we get there? So what are some of the best practice recommendations for creating these efficiencies around the scheduling process? So I think this might be the last poll, so I hope you don't mind bugging you one more time. What is your biggest challenge right now that you foresee in preparing your lottery or your scheduling process?
Again, the poll is now open. Thank you for your participation. We already have a number of votes rolling in pretty quick on
Awesome.
This one.
Great.
We'll have it up for about 30 more seconds.
Yeah, Dan, this one's going to be really interesting too, because I sort of in my mind have an idea of what's going to come out on top, but I will wait and see if my prediction is correct, because I could be. My prediction is from conversations I have and from my own experience. So I wonder if that translates across the audience.
Am I allowed to am I allowed to ask you to put your prediction out there before I share the results?
Yes, my prediction is going to be not enough people resources allocated to the process.
Okay, we're closing the poll in, well, it's closing right now actually. Okay. And actually overwhelming 88%, Brandy, is that collecting necessary data, site precept availability. And then and then we have folks, this was a multiple choice, choose all that apply. So that was 88% that picked that. A quarter, 25% picked not enough people, resources allocated to the process. And then 12%, we have the technology is difficult to use. Right. And coming in with at a whopping 0% outdated paper-based process.
Okay. Well, that's actually good. The 0% is actually good news. Mm-hmm. We don't really want anybody struggling with that. The others are, I think, easier to address, but we're going to address everything. So thanks, Dan, and thanks everybody for participating in that poll. So taking that information, let's talk about how we can improve the process. So for me, in my opinion, I think it all starts with evaluating your resources. And again, I don't mean just people resources. I mean, your software, your technology resources as well. But then also taking that, and remember we talked earlier about all those pieces, I called them pieces earlier, that made the process complex, addressing those by evaluating everything, in particular your resources, and then trying to put those pieces together efficiently to create efficiency. So the first item on the list is evaluate your process. So is it overly cumbersome? Ask yourself this question. Is why is it complex? Is it complex? If the answer to that is yes, then start asking questions about why. Is the process time consuming? Is it, I'm guessing it wouldn't be an issue if it were already efficient. But these are the things, you have to answer these questions first before you start thinking about how would we address these things. Was that, I mentioned this earlier as being a pain point, was the process inherited? And is there a possibility for that to change if it was inherited from previous team members? So evaluating the process is the first thing you can do to start thinking about how to make it a more effective, more efficient process. Always look for opportunities to improve that process. And that'll be kind of embedded in our conversation as we continue talking. Evaluating personnel. So how many folks do you have dedicated to the process? Is it a one-person show? That's a lot of work for one person. But that's the reality of it, is that many institutions really don't have a large-scale group of people dedicated to the clerkship scheduling. And let's face it, let's be serious here. I mean, it's typical for clerkship and clinical education, the clinical years, to kind of be siloed away from the preclinical years. So, I mean, I know that at OSU, they were two separate things. I mean, the management of the preclinical curriculum and everything, the scheduling and everything that went along with that was pretty separate from what happened in those clinical years, even though it was all considered, undergraduate medical education. And so what I really like about this particular action of evaluating personnel is because I have a really good example of how it got better. So at OSU, like I said, it was siloed, and my office primarily dealt with the preclinical curriculum. However, we were also the office that managed all of the educational technology. And so when the reason I got involved with the clinical education and the clerkship scheduling to begin with was because they recognized there's not enough people in clinical education to really maximize the efficiency of what we're doing here. So they asked. Growing a team can be a challenge because there's a lot that goes into like hiring more people to your team. But you never know what you can find and what resources you can come across until you ask. And so clinical education asked. And so myself and a colleague of mine, every year there was a role we played in that scheduling process because we brought a skill set to them that made their process more efficient. And so I really like talking about that because, it's not always a solution to hire more people, but it is a solution to look around your institution and see where the skill set lies and be able to like tap into that skill set for a moment and be able to utilize what they can bring to the table. So I really like talking about that. And then the data collection. This was a big challenge that you guys indicated, was getting that necessary information. Is it difficult? Well, according to you guys, it is. And that is the reality. It is difficult to get all of that in a timely manner because a lot of times, like bullet number 2, it is a waiting game when waiting really isn't an option. And you're under the gun and you really don't have time to kind of be getting all of this. And it seems like clerkship scheduling is a season almost. And if you're somebody who is in either in charge of the scheduling process or play a big part in the scheduling process, your anxiety probably increases a little bit as it starts reaching a certain time of the year where it's going to be trying to get that information, and because people are going to be waiting on it to be able to do the next step in the process. So it's a very critical piece of the process. Is there any way to improve that? Well, what we started doing at OSU was we started making it an ongoing process, meaning, building off of what we knew from the previous year. And obviously those sites can change from year to year, and being able to update that along the way makes the clerkship sort of season, the scheduling season, a little bit less anxious for us than when we were at OSU, because we were able to track those updates along the way. We gathered information, I keep saying along the way, but throughout the year. And obviously there's going to be some information that's still going to be difficult to get when the time comes. But doing the process along the way and making an ongoing data collection process versus waiting until a certain time to collect all of your data, that could possibly make things a little bit easier, less anxious, and more efficient. And then evaluating your technology. Are you leveraging everything you have at your disposal for technology for this process? Is the current software solution, so is it working for you? Is it saving people power time? Is it an efficient solution for you, really, is the question. And that's a question that you definitely want to be able to ask. And I know that, in the poll that you just answered, this was something that some of you answered was the software solution maybe wasn't the greatest for you. So are you maximizing efficiency by allowing the technology to do the heavy lifting? And if you're not, then that's definitely an area where efficiency can be really maximized here. So coordinating a complex schema of rotations may be my favorite part of a planning process. Said no one ever. Nobody wants to spend their time trying to do all of this by hand, or do all of this without technology or help from others. So evaluating your process, evaluating your personnel and those around you, and being able to tap into those resources around you, and evaluating your data collection process and making it an ongoing process instead of a once a year thing, and then evaluating your technology. I mean, these are really strong ways in which you can start making decisions that are going to hopefully make the process more efficient for you. But change is scary for a lot of people, and it takes buy-in from people, those around you, and it's scary to go from something that's known and you're used to it, even though it might have been inherited or whatever, to something unknown. But leveraging these resources and leveraging your technology can hopefully ease that burden a little bit and make it not so uncomfortable or scary to move forward. Now, technology. Now, in the poll, there was a large, overwhelming number of you that said, you're using technology for your clerkship scheduling process, which is great news because you're already one step ahead of those that maybe are still doing it on paper and wish they were moving to a more technology-based solution. But how do we do that? What do you do? So, scenario. You have gotten through a really difficult part of the phase of collecting all the necessary data in order to start this scheduling process. And so you find yourself asking, wouldn't it be nice if I could just take this data and this information and just turn it into actual student schedules and just make it happen? Well, the goal then for you is to use that information in the most efficient way to make that happen, to get those schedules created. So how can you do that? Use a lottery tool. A lot of you are already saying you're using a lottery tool, so let's talk about that. What can a lottery tool do? Well, the lottery tool that I used at OSU definitely did these things for me. It helped the clerkship with their efficiency and their scheduling process overall. The fairness. So that fairness is key. And a technology tool could absolutely provide a more fair platform when it takes into account a ranking system, a preference system, and an algorithm that runs in the background. Maximizing that top choice enrollment. That kind of goes along with that fairness. The algorithm within a lottery tool can help maximize that top choice enrollment. A lot of schools need more than one lottery. A lot of schools need to be able to do sequence lotteries to determine the sequence of the clerkships before scheduling where they're actually going to rotate. So a lottery tool can really help you create efficiency in those multi-step, multi-lottery processes. And then finally, the big one, the one that really that shows you the fruits of your labor, so to speak, where the system does all the heavy work for you, is in the enrollment. And then I put auto in front of that because that's what happens with a lottery tool. Is the final step is it goes ahead and takes all that information that you put into the system, that the students put into the system, and does all the heavy lifting, and then can auto enroll students into their rotations. And it takes a lot of that work off of you individually. So specifically, the product that we used at OSU was called Leo. And so I can speak to how Leo can help. And so here are some of the ways in which Leo can help. So you can bulk import data, which is such a time saver. If nobody wants to sit and manually enter information into the system one by one. So bulk import of that data that you collected before, the sites, the dates, the availability, things like that. Managing clinical course sections. So once the lottery, the information is imported and the courses are set up, the lottery helps set up those courses in a way that it's easy to manage. Again, I kind of repeat what I said before. A lot of schools use multi-step lotteries, multiple lotteries. And so Leo allows you to do both group or sequence lotteries as well as site and course lotteries, which comes in very handy. Did for us at OSU. And adding sections to the lottery record. So basically taking the information that you bulk import into the system and then creating a specific lottery with that information. You don't want to have to do that one by one because, you could potentially have hundreds and hundreds of sections and, sites and rotations where students can rotate throughout your state or across state lines. And you want to be able to do that in bulk. And so in Leo, you can certainly do that. One nice thing is being able to preview the results before they're finalized. Once you finalize a lottery and it does that auto enrolling, the students are enrolled. So this allows you to preview what students were awarded and allows you to kind of see if you like what you see and make decisions based on that. And then I put this in italics because this is, like I said, the fruits of your labor. All the information that you put into the system and the setup and the student participation in the lottery in Leo results in auto enrollment, which means you're not going in and enrolling students rotation by rotation. And then each year, once you have your bulk import from the first time you do it, you can reuse that bulk import the next year after you've made any modifications. And that's where that ongoing updating of that data, collecting that information on an ongoing basis allows you to update that bulk import of data spreadsheet all year long to be able to upload. And so those two kind of go hand in hand. And then there's more, obviously, but the biggest one that I want to mention, and then we'll move on, but is in Leo, the efficiency keeps going because it makes your lottery scheduling process more efficient, but it also allows you to run that process in the background. And so you don't have to sit and babysit what's happening. You can continue being efficient in your day, in your work, to keep working on what you need to work on, knowing that this lottery is functioning over here and it's running, and you don't have to keep an eye on it. So most people probably don't talk about their references, but I'm gonna mention my references here because I want to point something out. Well, first of all, I'm going to be honest with you. There's a ton of literature out there that talks about students' perspectives and students' side of the clerkship scheduling process. Making sure that they are making decisions about when to take certain rotations based on their interest for residency and stuff like that. There's not a great deal of research out there dedicated to the administrative side of creating a scheduling process. So that was one challenge. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is not many researchers, including myself, would really ever recommend using research from 1980 or from 1988. But as you can see, the bottom two there, I put those on there because yes, I read them, but also, and they sort of did inform some of the stuff that I talked about here, but really the reason I put them on here was because it's a testament to how long this conversation has been going on. It's a testament to it's like the attendance issue. It's been around for ages, and it's not completely solved yet, but we're getting there. I think we're closer to solving this problem than we are the attendance problem, in my opinion. So I just wanted to point that out, that this is not something that just came about as being a very complex situation. So I think technology will continue to help as, concepts around clerkship schedules get more complex. And of course, I have to show my references for any of the images that I use. So thank you to all these schools. And so Dan, this is the end of my presentation. Review my objectives here. We talked about the complexity of clerkship schedules. We talked about best practice approaches. And in my opinion, the greatest best practice approach is evaluate, 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 because that's step one. And what that's going to do is going to allow you to start making decisions about your process, your personnel, your data collection, your technology. And in the end, those are the things that are going to create efficiency for you when those pieces start coming together after you evaluate those things. And then we talked about resources and technology and how to use those things to increase efficiency, and how a lottery tool increases efficiency in this process. So I'm happy to take questions at this point. Hopefully there's some good questions out there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again, Brandy, for a great presentation. We have about 10 minutes for Q&A right now. If you do have a question, please go ahead and post that in the Q&A. We'll do our best to get to it. We do already have a few in there, which I will jump on right now. If we don't get to it, don't worry, we'll reach out afterward. So first and foremost, I'm actually going to steal this one from the chat. Is there a limit to how many lotteries that can be run through Da Vinci's Leo system?
No, there is not a limit. We see schools, in my experience working on this side, on the ed tech side, we see schools run upwards of 10, 20 different lotteries to accommodate what they need to do, running sequence lotteries first and then running targeted lotteries for each one of those sequences. We see schools that do one really big lottery, and we see everything in between. So I have not seen a limit yet. That's a good question.
Great, thank you. Okay, another question here. Brandy, you spoke about evaluating technology. Do you have any best practice tips from your time working in MedEd on how you personally went through evaluating technology?
Yeah, well, I wish I could ask technology in general or technology specific to the lottery.
In general.
In general, okay. So there are many, I say many, there are good guides out there that, and I think one was just mentioned not too long ago in the MedEd chat that Gary Beck does on the Dr. Ed listserv, that kind of guides you through the process of evaluating whether or not a piece of technology is appropriate for your needs. And so that's really what it boils down to, is determining. I mean, I had a really great team and an administration that really supported the growth of my team. And so I was able to really pull in some skill sets from across my team that had a lot of background in educational technology. And not everybody's going to have that at their disposal. But I think understanding first and foremost what's the challenge I'm trying to solve. You don't want to get a piece of technology for the sake of having a piece of technology, and you don't want to ask people to use it for the sake of using it if it's not providing you some benefit in some way. So the first question always is to identify what problem or challenge or pain point am I trying to solve, and then that'll will narrow your scope right there on what you might want to be looking for, and then then looking at, is it feasible, is it manageable in terms of, do I have the right people to be able to manage this? Is it laborious? Is it Is it something I'm going to have to create a lot of buy-in for, or is it something that people are going to be willing to be open-minded about making a change? And those are just the pieces, and those are some of the ancillary things that people might not think about when they're talking about a piece of technology. But when I was trying to figure out what piece of technology to bring to OSU to replace the one we had specifically to manage clerkships, those are some of the things I had to think about, aside from what challenge are we trying to solve, is who's going to be using the technology, and how are they going to take this change, or how are we going to approach that, and is it worth it? And
Great.
It was. So.
Great. Thank you for that. We have a couple more great questions. Next up, we are using a computerized lottery system. Can you explain how Leo lottery system runs? i.e., does it randomize students and then assign them based on student preferences? And how does it handle students who fail to enter in enough preferences selections? Ooh, there's a lot there. So
yeah. Go ahead.
You good there? You want me to repeat?
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Okay.
I think I remember. I may have to have you repeat it in a minute if I don't hit them all. So the idea behind the lottery in Leo is that sort of that randomized algorithm that runs in the background, that students go in and they do rank preferences based on what options they have available to them, and the computer takes that into consideration. The system, the platform takes that into consideration, and that all plays into the randomization, so to speak, algorithm of what's happening in the background. The other part of that question was about
the second half was
students that don't preference enough things, right?
Correct.
And so so Leo has a really great feature, and we actually had our students at OSU do this as part of their process. They have a really neat feature that once they're done preferencing, I'm not sure that's the word, what they know they want to go ahead and put in as their preferences. And so then there's all these other options available, and Leo has a feature where you can check a box and it will go ahead and check everything that's left, so the system knows to never not assign a student something. It's going to go through all of their preferences first, and if the algorithm ever gets to a point where the student just can't get something that they want because of the process, then it knows that there's other things checked there, and it keeps the student from having to really work hard at that part of it. They can just go ahead and check that box, and it'll go ahead and just allow the system to know that they are okay with throwing any of these other things in the mix after the fact. And there's an upside and a downside to that. But the upside is the student never not gets enrolled in something. The downside is that's, if that happens, then there's opportunity to make a swap or to make a change in that person's what they're awarded. So, and that's just an extra step.
Great, thank you.
Did I answer everything in that question? I'm not sure.
Well, I believe so. Thank you for that.
Okay.
It sounded clear to me. Okay. Next question. How many lotteries can you run? Do you think it would be better to run one large lottery or separate lotteries for each block?
Yeah, I love this question. This is a great question. And you're probably gonna, my first response, you're probably gonna like, oh, well, I knew that. So my first response is, it depends. It depends on what your current structure is. So if you are a school that allows students to choose their sequence of clerkships, and you want that done first because you want that taken care of, and you want to see that first before letting them preference where they're going to take those rotations, then that would be a situation where you'd want multiple lotteries. If you want them to make those decisions simultaneously, then one large lottery will do. So if you have it set up so that students can rank Site A during this rotation for pediatrics, so you're basically ranking all of that together, so that increases the number of options for them to choose from. it increases the list, but it happens all in one lottery. So it is a school preference, but the cool thing is at Leo, I get to work with a lot of schools through this process, and we've seen everything from one extreme of many, many, many lotteries to be able to accommodate their clerkship structure to schools that do one large lottery, and of course everything in between. So we really do work with the schools to figure out, are you happy with the way your structure is? Is there room for improvement, or is there political capital to change anything? If not, great, we're going to help you figure out which one of these large lottery, multiple lotteries is best for what you want to accomplish. And I enjoy having those conversations with schools. I do. I'm a problem solver. I like to just help people figure that out.
Nice. So we have time for hopefully 2 more. I'm going to try and squeeze 2 quick ones in here. Okay, Brandy?
Okay.
How have you addressed the issue of fairness for meeting your mission with students returning to where they may be from versus where they want to eventually practice, if that is outside of their home area? That's a toughie.
Yeah, that is a tough one. And I would, this is one of those things where you could say, I'm gonna hide behind the technology. So I'm gonna let the lottery platform process, take the reins on that. Students will have the ability to, go in and preference where they're from, if that's where they want to go rotate. But they may not get it, and being able to explain to students how the process works beforehand, so that they're aware of the fact that there is a possibility you don't get your very first choice. We're proud to say at Leo that's there's a very high percentage of students that do get what they want, but it's all based on the algorithm, and it's also based on what types of lotteries you're doing, if you're doing multiple lotteries, and all that plays into that. But in terms of fairness, I think that's something that the lottery tool does for you. It provides you that cover of saying, well, this is the same process that every other student had to participate in, and therefore you weren't singled out. It wasn't there was no favoritism to anybody or anything like that. But that is a tough one.
Great.
Especially when you have to explain it to students and they don't want to hear it. So.
Thank you. Last one. We'll get you out on this one, folks. Can administrators make changes to the placements between preview mode and finalizing the lottery? And how do we make these changes?
So not in Leo. So the idea behind the preview mode in Leo is it allows you, and this is exactly what we did at OSU. In the preview mode, you look at everything the student was awarded, and you can analyze that, and you can make note of, and we made notes of any changes we knew we needed to make. And we knew that there was going to be a period after finalizing it that we needed to, this plays into the fairness piece, I suppose, too, that after the finalization, there's a period of time where we allow students to go through a swap process. But in terms of the preview mode, it's to allow you to see what was awarded, make note of the changes, and then finalize it and go in and quickly make those drop-in ads, so to speak. And that's another thing about Leo, is it's really easy to go in and remove a student from what they were awarded for pediatrics and then move them over here to this rotation and vice versa. So.
Great, thank you. So
Welcome.
We are just about at the end of our time. Again, we appreciate everyone's attendance and participation. Most certainly, we appreciate you, Brandy, for this terrific presentation, all the information and answering so many questions. We have had a couple questions roll in at the end here. Unfortunately, since we're out of time, I will get them to Brandy, and Brandy will get back to you individually on those. So that we make sure that those get answered for you. Again, we appreciate everyone's participation, and please look out for more great webinars like we had today with Randy. And again, we look forward to providing more great content for you moving forward. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dan.